Now, good afternoon, folks. You're all coming in fairly rapidly. You're all very, very welcome to this, the fourth in our transport series for public sector transport managers from the transport community within SEAI's public sector program. So as you log in there, if you could mute your mic, we will absolutely ask you to unmute and maybe even go on video later on. If you're familiar with the format, the whole point of this is to promote networking amongst fleet managers across the public sector. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just while you're all getting settled and the last few people are joining, Mari's just going to let them in. I will just go through a few opening slides before I hand you over to Ray Connolly in Bus Éireann to have a chat about hydrogen, and then we'll talk about the alternative fuels grant, which was announced last week. So just to kick things off, apologies. This is the kind of things you asked about. So this entire series of events is driven by the topics that you, the audience, the fleet managers have asked for. So we've worked our way through a few on staff EV charging, managing data for EVs. Hydrogen is what we're on to next, okay? Because you're all asking about sort of future fuels for heavy duty vehicles. So that's what we're doing. We're moving our way through it. We'll be using Slido, which is what this is from. This result is from. And you're going to need your mobile phone handy, okay, just to respond to the Slido questions. And the main reason for that is that the questions are not hugely important, but at the end we have a little bit of a survey, and that's when you'll tell us what you want us to do next, okay? So in other words, the topic for the next event, etc. We take that in from your feedback, okay? So, yep, we're getting there. So just to quickly reprise the events that we've done to date. In the 18th of November, we did an event with the Department of Transport introducing the revised Clean Vehicle Directive to you all, and that's going to come into effect on the 2nd of August 2021, so not too far away now. On the 20th of Jan, we did one on charging EVs, and An Post kindly joined us and explained how they've got on with what is now Ireland's largest private EV charging network, and is also, certainly by comparing to my competitors and rivals around Europe, is the largest EV fleet in Europe. It is 1,000 electric vans now on the road. Now, I'm not sure An Post would like me to be quoted on that just yet. I think they're still working on it, but you know, it's quite a significant achievement. The last event we did then was reporting kilowatt hours and charging heavy duty vehicles. So that was Dublin Bus and Cork City Council talking about those two topics. So today, you know, you're asking about hydrogen, so we're going to do hydrogen, and Ray Connolly has very kindly agreed to join us, and I'll talk and we'll have a little bit of debate after Ray has spoken with his presentation, so Q&A. You can put your questions, and Mari's put a little reminder there in the chat box for you to put your questions into the chat, and if I see something that's quite timely, I'll interrupt Ray with that. And then we'll move on to talking about the alternative fuels heavy duty vehicle grant, which, as I said, was announced last week. And the last thing we'll do is that survey that I mentioned of, you know, what it is you would like us to talk about next. So all the topics, all the content is driven by you. So just a little Slido just to kick things off, and just to make sure it's working, to be honest, more than anything else. Give Ray a feel for your thought on it. In Slido, using your mobiles is probably the handiest way to do it. You can go to slido.com, and the code for today is 9705. And the question that we're asking you is, with regard to hydrogen as a fuel for your fleets, what one word springs to mind? Okay, and you can enter as many words as you like and re-enter others to make them bigger. So, you know, if you think something's important, all you have to do is key it in again and it'll get bigger on screen to form a word cloud. Okay, is it green? Yeah, great question. Yeah, how green is it? Clean? Yeah, I think Ray has got that covered. So, is unavailable. Okay, right. Yes, Slido is a safe space. It is anonymous, just to say that, right? Yeah, it's a gas. That's correct. Safety, yeah. Refueling, the source, yeah, feeding into that. So I know Ray is able to talk about all of that. Expensive, yeah. There's a good question. That's brilliant. When? Right, well, this is real life experience and we're bringing here today, folks. So when is now? Okay, safe, clean, available, refueling, infrastructure. How soon? So timing. Very good. And I'll just see, keep on going there, folks. Wow, okay, so we've got 50 people online. We normally like to get at least half of you to respond. So we'll just give that another couple of seconds. And I know, Ray, you've pretty much covered all of those topics there. So no need really to rehearse them. Colors, the colors of hydrogen. That's going to be an interesting question. I think we'll have to have a debate about that one later on. Power to weight, yeah, and Ray, I know you're on that topic as well. And dangerous, okay, that's the first time that's cropped up. Okay, good. And as I say, the main reason for using the Slido is just give us kind of anonymous little survey where all of the slides that you see here today will be put back to you via email from Mari on a PDF. So all of them in one group. And in those slides, we will put all of the results from the Slidos will be in the slides. So in other words, you'll all get to see all of these as well. They won't just disappear after the event. Quick reminder to put your questions into chat. And we're pretty much there at a quorum, if I can call it that. We've got more than half of you have answered the Slido. So we consider that to be a reasonable result, and we're up and running. So we won't delay. And I'm going to close the poll now. I think, Ray, you've got a reasonably good idea of what people are concerned about. I know your own content covers most of it, so that's perfect. And I'll introduce you now to Ray Connolly, Technical Manager Engineering at Bus Éireann. And Ray, I'll move the slides on for you at your own pace. You just shout and I'll keep it moving. I'll keep an eye on the chat for you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Conor. Thanks. I'll tell you, the Slido thing is actually very interesting there, because believe you me, I'm every bit as worried and concerned about a lot of the questions that were asked there anyway. And we've already had our fingers in the pie, I suppose, in terms of hydrogen. I've been involved with it probably for about 2 years now in terms of particularly with Hydrogen Mobility Ireland, which you'll see on the screen there. But it's just I'm going to go run very quickly through the pilot trial. It's a kind of a research trial that we had the opportunity to do late last year, involving many of the members of Hydrogen Mobility Ireland and kind of key stakeholders from the state as well. You'll see the Department of Transport there, National Transport Authority, Dublin Airport. And we had other members of Hydrogen Mobility Ireland, including VOC, on board with this, and Toyota and Kitano, who provided a bus for us as well. So as Bus Éireann and Dublin Bus, we kind of stood in there as part of the SEAI group, who were kind of leading this for us, at least, to operate the vehicles on the trial. And again, as I said, it was a research trial, so it very much had an academic input from the likes of DCU there with James Carton, who's been heavily involved in where hydrogen is going in the country here. So just if you want to pop on there, Conor, maybe just outline some of the objectives for the main stakeholders that we did have.
Sorry, my fault.
Yeah, you're okay. Just for the Department of Transport themselves, it kind of presents an opportunity to run a single deck FCV hydrogen vehicle through the same control kind of test that they completed on a range of vehicles back in 2019, and that kind of included comparisons between battery electric and CNG and hybrids and Euro 6s and all sorts. So that's been published. So they hadn't had the opportunity to do hydrogen at that stage. So this was a good opportunity for them to do that. And the test cycle that they use as a standard on all of those tests is it's kind of almost 20 kilometers long. It's a 2-ton load that we used on this particular bus, so it's about 50% of the payload capacity. Bus stops all the stops along the way with the doors open for about 20 seconds, and it's done to simulate kind of a typical average service conditions. The results kind of the hydrogen side will be kind of published as an addendum to those 2019 test reports as well. And again, we'll probably carry out a similar test with the department on the double deck pilot deployments that we're doing later this year as well, to get the same feel for the hydrogen. So that was their kind of interest in it. For the DCU side, on the next slide there, we had presented them with an opportunity to kind of assess the physical and practical applications of hydrogen. Some of them which are listed there, obviously taking data from the bus itself and analysing fuel data and costs, the impacts of temperature and load and topography. It covered looking at behavioural science was another aspect of it as well, what people felt about hydrogen. And compiling that kind of benchmark data for future scenario modeling, so we can use that in the future for things like bus routes and stuff like that, where we're going to deploy hydrogen. Again, why hydrogen? It's mainly, the biggest impact of it is in terms of longer distance, where battery electric vehicle or battery electric technology may not lend itself. I think there's a limit to battery electric's capability in that regard. So this is kind of, we're looking at it certainly from the point of view of longer distance, so your outer urban and your intercity kind of operations eventually. And it's certainly gathering pace in terms of development of products inside that for a start. And we've seen that with different suppliers that we deal with as well. On the DCU side, they have amassed a significant amount of data, which they're currently kind of crunching the numbers through on that to prepare kind of a more detailed report, probably a few months' time, I'd say, to be fair to them. From the CIE and the BOC side, really the trial was an opportunity for a first kind of hands-on feel of hydrogen, particularly around the technology and the fueling. And similarly for BOC in terms of kind of addressing both the physical fueling requirements and the supply chain, the development of that. I mean, the supply is obviously the biggest issue on this one at the minute, but it will come, and it's just the whole industry needs to move on it, I guess. So it's just in terms of larger scale deployments from the OC side. In terms of just moving on there, just to run through the bus itself that we use, the vehicle that we use, a picture of it there decked out in the additional liveries that we gave. It's a Catano H2 City Gold city bus. It's a 10.7 metre long, so it's a short city bus, we call it. Right-hand drive, obviously, it's an urban bus, and it's M3 Class 1 certified, so it's the same certification as any other single-deck or double-deck bus that we have out there. And I suppose a comment on that, the bus itself, 80% of it is exactly the same as a diesel bus, except the drivetrain is just different on it, okay? The rest of it is pretty much the same brakes, same suspension, pretty much, okay? The capacity on the bus is with 33 seated passengers, and it can take up to 31. Not that you'd want to be on it with 31, but that translates to a payload of about 4.3 tons. Okay. I think the last time I spoke, somebody was asked a question on carb weight and stuff like that. It's about 12.7 tons on this. The unladen weight's about 11.7, and gross is around 17 ton for this particular bus. So that's just the kind of the scale of dimension of the bus that we were using on it. Hop on again there.
Sure.
So just in terms of the fuel cell and the powertrain, it's a Toyota 60 kilowatt rated fuel cell stack, which is similar to that I think used in the Mirai, the Toyota Mirai car. So it's quite a small fuel cell stack in this particular bus. The standard fuel times on it, and this is kind of critical with hydrogen, typically in a fully fledged fueling station environment, you'll be fueling HGVs at 350 bar, and the typical fuel time for that is about 9 minutes, okay? If you're at 350 bar. For the trial, because we were using a kind of a temporary fueling arrangement with BOC, the method they're using is a decant method through tube trailers. So the maximum pressure we can get out or get into the bus is at 228 bar. That means that the fueling time will be slightly longer. So we were seeing fueling times around 20 minutes on it. And while the 5 tanks can kind of take up to 37.5 kilos when you are fueling at 350 bar, in a fully fledged fueling station, the lower trial fueling pressure meant that we were really getting a max of about 24 kilos into the bus. But it was also about just seeing what we could do with what we had. So we're getting about 24 kilos into the tanks, and the fuel cell itself is combined. It's a 29 kilowatt hour. It's combined with 29 kilowatt hour LTO battery packs, and then has a Siemens motor drivetrain with regenerative braking.
And Ray, I can see a charging socket on that slide there. Did you charge it at all, or was it purely hydrogen?
No, in theory, you don't really. The reason the charging sockets there is more for preconditioning the vehicle in the mornings, cold mornings, that kind of thing. And also then if you had the tanks isolated, that you can charge the bus to move it, just for maneuvering.
All right. Yeah.
You can just keep going there, I think, Connor, just, of course, with any trial, there's always a lot of exposure in the media and interest in it and stuff like that. And we got a lot of good exposure in it, just to say it there, and across most kind of platforms. So just a few photographs there. Bottom right-hand side is Ms. Raymond Ryan, who's very interested in this stuff. I'm going to pop it on again there.
Yeah, sure.
So just getting into the trial itself then, and how it went. We kind of planned the DOE testing, the department's testing first, primarily, and just using independent drivers that they engage themselves, and just in that controlled testing environment and test route. We then went into the kind of more real life scenario of operating the bus in service on a section of the bus iron route 109A between Dublin Airport and Ashbourne, over a 3-week period, operating kind of Monday to Friday, and then starting early in the morning and kind of completing 2 to 3 round trips each day on those routes, refueling in the afternoon in a BOC site out in West Dublin. We used the route, and you can see there the map, you can see the topography chart below that again, which is important both in battery electric and hydrogen. So we use those profiles as well in terms of pulling the routes together that we were operating on. You can pop on again there, I think. Yeah. So just again, you know, they're the 2 routes there. The outbound route from Dublin Airport kind of goes across, goes down to DCU, and then goes out to Ashburn. The return leg kind of cuts back from Kilshane Cross directly over to the back road of the airport there. Total round trip on it's just over 50 kilometers. So therefore we were kind of doing between 100 150 kilometers in service each day. And when you took in the light mileage over and back to BOC for refueling, it was doing about 200 kilometers a day. Okay. What I will say is, while it was with Bus Éireann doing that, we had very few issues with the bus as a prototype bus. It was actually brilliant. You know, prototypes can be precarious at the best of times because they are what they are, but in this particular model, the build quality was very good. So we were very happy with it and had very few issues with it. Certainly none on the fuel cell side of it at all. Just I think you can move on there. We also looked at kind of speed profiles on the route as well. So it was a real mix, and we picked this particular section of the route because you get a real mix of kind of that city centre low speed operation, the stop start kind of stuff inside kind of in the slower areas and around the towns, but you then get that kind of pull up to higher speeds in around the national roads and the motorway sections of it as well. Okay.
Good. Keep going. Yeah.
Another tip on there. Yeah. So that was kind of the first four weeks or so. The next week then we spent was kind of moved to Dublin Bus. So the bus moved over to Dublin Bus operating shuttle runs that were defined there around the DCU interlinking the DCU campuses on the top left-hand side there, and then they spent a few days operating on the red, green, and blue car park runs in around Dublin Airport. I suppose one of the biggest drawbacks while the bus was out in service was the loading. We were restricted 25% capacity due to COVID at the time throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
So our loadings were very, very light in that, but thankfully we had kind of, you know, we had that bit with the department's testing at the start where we had, you know, 2 tons of weight in there as well to kind of simulate a half load. So, however, you know, we kept going. We're not going to let COVID stop us. Going to hop on again there. Yeah. So just to look at the fuel and rig and that kind of stuff, connectors onto the bus there. On the left-hand side in the photo on the left, you can see, you know, you have the fuel and dispenser, which is a Way TK16H2. It's on the right-hand side there. The high flow connector, and that's linked to TN1 receptacle on the bus itself. So you can just about see the receptacle or the cap of the receptacle underneath. You see the connector on there. And the other thing you'll see there is is visible is the earth connection clip and the gauge there, obviously, as well for the pressure. Okay. Middle picture at the bottom there is actually BOC there, actually placing the rig on. So again, there was no issues with the fueling throughout. It's obviously it's not the ideal setup you'd have in a full scale environment, but certainly in terms of the transfer in, I think BOC were quite happy with it as well.
And did anyone other than BOC do it, right?
No, because it's in the middle of their industrial gas production facility. So it was, you know, they were very nervous about anybody else other than themselves doing it anyway.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Just to move on again. So just a little bit around the tanks again. You know, we're still learning a lot on this stuff, but the gas tanks themselves are pretty much similar to, you know, other CNG tanks and things like that. And I mean the tanks themselves, sorry, you have obviously the pressure release devices on them. You have this carbon fiber composite that they're encased in, which in effect is there really to protect them from penetration or from damage. You know, they will isolate. I mean, the tanks isolate as soon as anything's detected wrong, whether it's temperature, pressures, whatever in the systems. So it is quite safe in that regards, and it's as safe as any other fuel. I'll put it that way. It's how you handle it, and it's the, you know, what you put in place to handle and the gas, like any other gas or fuel. So from that point of view, I mean, there's there's a shed load of health and safety stuff behind this and protection on it. So again, even if pipes and stuff like that, feed pipes into the tanks get ruptured or something like that, the amount of hydrogen that's in them is very small. It blows off very quickly.
Right.
You know, and the tanks themselves are isolated then. So the tanks themselves, you'd probably need to drop them from close to outer space to actually force them. Okay.
Higher than the roof of the bus, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. So just if you want to pop it on there, that's just to give a context of the size of a fuel cell. Typically, you can see the guy standing on the right hand side of it there.
It's tiny, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. I said that's what they're using the Mirai as well. So it is a small fuel cell stack for larger, heavier duty applications. Yet you may have a slightly bigger stack than that as well. So that's just that. Another important part of the trial was training, obviously, and we just wanted to bring people through that. So, you know, again, the drivers that were involved in driving the buses are all maintenance people, even though they weren't hands-on maintenance on the vehicle over the 6-week period. We still wanted them to understand the technology and you know what it was about and learn about it. Same with their engineers and you know, the Katana support agent on the ground here, who was very good over the course of the while. They needed to learn about it. But we also, I think, it was important to engage with the fire services as well. Given the technology and the infancy of it, we engaged, and it was very positive in fairness from Dublin fire services in that regard. So they attended the training, they looked at the bus, they were happy with what they saw.
Very good. And any reaction from your drivers, just as you mentioned them?
You know, I'll cover a little bit later, but
let's leave it.
Very positive.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, no problem. You want to just keep going there. That's just setting out the planning that we did around the trial itself. The phase 0 really was getting the bus, shaking it down, making sure you're happy with it, getting it to a good to go position. The same with the fueling, you know, with BOC, that they were happy to press ahead. And we didn't do that until we were, everybody was, completed the training and the test runs and the fueling and stuff like that. We then went into the phase 1 deployment, which was the Dublin bus, the departments, test runs, and then the preparation for the in-service operation, then into our own 3-week cycle, and then beyond into the Dublin bus section. And while that was going on in parallel, DCU had applied various different additional bits of sensors and kit hanging out all over the place, from which they were collecting the data. That went on throughout all of the operational cycles, and then the last phase was just the wind down and the return of the vehicle from the trial. So we pretty much kept to the plan. There was a few tweaks along the way, as there will be always of these things, but it went pretty well, I think, in fairness. It was excellent. It's fair to say. So I suppose the important bit then was what did we get out of it? As I mentioned, their DCU are number crunching at the moment, so there's a lot of different outputs that will come out of it, which we don't have the detail on yet. But just to give some very high level figures on it, our expectation going into the trial was probably, you know, a fuel consumption figure of around 7 to 9, based on what we've been, you know, the information that we had from different suppliers and experiences in other countries and things like that. We were kind of expecting 7 to 9. What we saw on the bus overall in total, I think, traveled just over 3,000 kilometers. The fuel consumption on it, we saw a range between kind of 5 to 6, and then, you know, the little star there is just bearing in mind that we weren't running at full loads or anything near it during it. But the 6, for example, the Department of Transport trials, from memory, I think their fuel consumptions were in the late 5s. Okay, so you know, just under 6. Whereas some of the lighter loads where we had nobody on board or that type of thing, they were probably down at the lower end of the 5. Okay, but it was in that kind of range. You spoke there, Conor, about driver feedback and stuff like that. Just some comments there from drivers. I mean, they felt driving the bus itself was pretty much like driving any bus. Was their comment. It was a lot quieter, obviously. They found it very easy to adapt to in terms of, you know, transferring from one to the other. And yeah, no, so it was very positive in overall. I think there's very few negative comments about it, and there were more to do with little niggly things with heating or with, you know, with stuff like that, things that can be ironed out. Passengers as well, there was a lot of while there wasn't a lot of passengers carried as such, well, they did get some feedback, not as much as they'd like to, but in general it was very positive, and it was very much based around the positive around zero emissions and achieving that, and, you know, having public transport in that environment is the right way to go. So I think, you know, the general outcomes were pretty good and pretty positive. So overall, the trial, it went very well. We will see a bit more information out from it, as I say, from the DCU analysis and stuff like that as well in due course. But it was helped by certainly by the bus and the quality and the standard and the support that we got throughout it as well. So I think just to
one more
on, it's kind of where do we go next? Well, we already have plans, so we're moving on from that little single research trial, and we kind of had it lined up that it kind of would seeg in nicely to give us a first look at actually deploying and a pilot deployment of 3 hydrogen deckers, which you'll kind of see on the right hand side there, which we're about to take delivery of. And the idea of this isn't to go straight into just getting the 3 buses in and waving goodbye to them as they go out the gate to go into service. Of telling our own operations people, no, this is very much a phased pilot deployment where we need to take it bit by bit and phase it up, and start off with maybe 2 round trips, build it up to 3, 4 round trips a day, 5 round trips, and see how far we can go. We still have the constraints on supply in terms of the daily production and supply of hydrogen volumes for the vehicles. We will have enough to do these 3 buses, and we'll be able to get our hands on enough here. But there's the bigger question about, these 3 buses have been purchased. We'll have them for 10, 12 years or whatever it is. So they're here for good, they're not going anywhere. So we have to kind of try and find that. So we'll be going out to tender for a supply of fuel as well.
So just, Ray, I think that's maybe quite astounding for quite a few people on the line. It's certainly news to me. You have 3 owned double-deck hydrogen buses now.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's a brave investment by the NTA to where they want to see the technology before they commit to investment in larger scale numbers. So they want to certainly have a look at the buses and what how do they perform in real life out in service every day. So the Catano trial was really just to see the technology and get a look at it and see what's involved. This is now kind of a harder edged real life scenario.
Very impressive, Ray.
Yeah, no, it's look at, I think and it probably refers back to the slides earlier on, in the State Inc. scenario, if you like, hydrogen has taken quite a bit of an advancement and acceleration in terms of its potential as certainly as a zero emissions fuel in the future. And it's not just in public transport; it's across all sectors, really. Industry and other places outside public transport, other transport modes outside public transport. So I think coming back to the comments there, the questions that were the points that were raised in the slides there, it's not the vehicle technology that's going to be the problem here. That'll come, and it comes at a price, obviously, but it's like everything else. The more volume, the cheaper they get, or the more the price comes down, and that'll happen over time. Effectively the same with the fuel as well. The more it's used, the more it'll come down, and it'll come down in price. And maybe to give an example, a couple of calculations in myself. If you looked at the fuel consumption we were talking about there, on a parity level, if you take the price of diesel and using the same amount of diesel for the bus that we use there and the consumption that was at, the hydrogen in theory would need to be at around €5.83 to be parity with diesel.
Okay? €5.83 a kilogram.
Yeah. Okay. And I think on a large scale, it's probably achievable to produce hydrogen below that, and obviously the rest is made up of margins and whatever else. But I think if you can get down to somewhere between €5 and €6 on the price ultimately, it's nowhere near that at the moment, because the economies of scale don't allow you to produce it and to sell it at that kind of rate. So you're in the order of probably about 4 times that at the moment.
Yeah, but that was for grey hydrogen, wasn't it? Hydrogen from fossil fuel.
It's certified green, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much indeed, Ray. You covered a lot of ground at a hell of a pace there, and well done. I've got a couple of questions in for you, so are you happy taking some questions?
Yeah, I can't guarantee I'll answer them, but I'll do my best.
Now, I've lots of nerdy questions, but there's 2 really good ones in. So the first one is from Ken Morley. What's the capital cost of these compared with conventional vehicles? And I'm assuming he means conventional diesel vehicles.
Yeah, okay. Typically, a bus, a double-deck bus, for example, is probably costing, for public transport at least, it's probably costing in around, what is it? Broadly speaking, broadly terms, about 300K.
Yeah.
Okay.
300,000. I think people are often very surprised to hear how much they are, but yeah.
Yeah. No, they're not cheap. A hydrogen vehicle is probably somewhere around the same as a battery electric vehicle. So for similar kind of type of vehicle, you're probably talking about 500,000.
Right.
Plus. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right. All right. So that answers that one. As always, these things will come down over time.
Yeah.
Oh, there's loads of questions coming in. This is great stuff, folks. Thank you. Do you expect to buy the fuel in or produce on site?
That's a massive question, right? And it's you know, if you just take SEAI Group alone, we have to look at the two bus companies, the rail companies. We have to look at the properties, the sites we have, and then you have to look at, even if you talk to the energy producers, there's different approaches that they'll all have to what's the most efficient way to get your hydrogen produced and then to your vehicle. And hydrogen is a bit like Guinness. The more distance you travel it over, the less efficient the whole process becomes, because you're losing a certain amount every time you shift it from one tanks to other tanks and stuff like that, and into trailers. The most efficient way is to actually produce it right beside the vehicle and put it straight into it, in simple terms. So it's a huge question, and it's one that everybody kind of has to sit and look at. And I suppose at the end of the day, there's different ways to do it. Yes, you can put an electrolyzer on your site. For us to do whatever 30 buses, probably costs about €2 million. And we don't currently own the diesel infrastructure, and we don't necessarily want to own the hydrogen production. But then we have to look at the option in terms of, well, if we did do that, is there a facility maybe to put that back into the grid system, or back into, so maybe there's opportunities. So what I'd say is, whatever way you look at it, there's opportunities on this one for people, whether you buy it in or whether you actually produce the stuff yourself. You kind of have to weigh it up in terms of your
and there's, if you look forward 10 years, there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to export all the wind power that we have. We're going to have a lot of curtailed wind. I've forgotten what the figure is, so we're going to have a lot of spare electricity to do something with.
Somebody recently described Ireland's potential on hydrogen because of our access to wind and water as being, we potentially could be the Dubai of hydrogen.
There you go. I like the sound of that. That sounds good. Yeah, we might get our pensions paid yet. You never know. And Louis has asked the question: what's the total weight of the powertrain and fuel storage compared to diesel fueled vehicles?
Oh, no, that's a good question.
Well, if you like, you can come back on them, because I have lots of questions here. So if you want to
come back on that one,
that's great. So that's one for Louis. And Mary, just might make a note that we even if we don't manage it today, we go back to Louis on that. And Caleb Clark has asked the question: can your existing buses be retrofitted with hydrogen? So that'll be retrofitted with electric as well, I suppose. If you talk about comparing it to retrofitting Euro 6 to Euro 3s and 4s, wouldn't do it necessarily. I think it's a big ask for us in the public transport environment to try and move this forward. It's with the age of the fleet and the duty that goes on those buses and stuff like that, because they do get hammered over their lifetime. It's probably not retrospective, probably isn't the direction for us. It might suit other kind of transport modes, but I don't necessarily think it would be the way to go. You could end up in more trouble. There's certain kinds of vehicles it's a very attractive option for, but as you said, your vehicles have a long life, a hard life. Shay Broderick has asked the question: is the fuel supply secure, and does the cost fluctuate less than fossils? And then he's asking a second question, which I'll come back to in a second. So maybe just deal with the fuel security first. On the fuel supply and stuff like that, it's at very early stages in its infancy here. There's only one place you can really fuel at the moment, and it's not even a proper fueling place. So it's probably the questions there are probably if for the
the energy suppliers more so.
Yeah. Well, I think I suppose to expand on what we've been saying here, by the by, here in Dublin, it's BOC up on the Nace Road. It's an industrial, chemical site. In Ballymena, I think they have the electrolyzer physically on site of a wind farm above the bus company that makes the buses. So and they then truck it into Belfast for the buses that they have up there. So I think
at very early stages on that one as well, Colin.
Yeah, that's it, and I think so. In terms of security, it would be an indigenous fuel eventually, whether that's this year or 10 years. I don't think we know just yet. And then the second question, I've got it in two different ways, from Shay and from Art Hennessy. But is the technology adaptable to heavy goods vehicles, and what heavy goods vehicles are available at the moment? And again, feel free to kick to touch if you like. I'll answer.
No, I mean, again, and apologies, I suppose my expertise is more in the bus and coach market, so I'm not as familiar with the heavy goods, trucks and stuff like that. But I do know it is going in that direction. So when we sat down with the Department of Transport a few years back, when they pitched the whole idea of doing the test I was talking about earlier on, the control test, they were talking about doing a lot of technologies, and we said, but you have to look at what the vehicle suppliers are, where their R&D is going in. And at the time, it was all electric. Okay? Right. Yeah. Everything was electric, and CNG was an old technology, and there was nobody developing it any further. So everything was going into electric because that's where the demand was coming from, the urban environment. However, I suppose you can say in the intervening years, the limitations or the constraints of battery electric vehicle for being rolled out beyond urban is also now kind of being recognized. And what you can see now is where some of the coach producers are now looking at hydrogen, and that's their main R&D focus. So we already know that Van Hool, for example, in Belgium, they're already out there with, talking about a hydrogen coach. You have some, I think in Poland, there's some developments. And I know ourselves, we've been talking to some of our own suppliers, from time past, and they're talking about having hydrogen coaches prototypes by 2023. Now when I hear that, I think that's magnificent, because 12 months ago, there was nothing in that regard, right? Yeah. So, and what I'd say is they're not talking about having the prototype, they're actually well advanced in the development of those prototypes, in terms of they have all of their partners that they're going to, for the fuel cells and for the tanks and all that. That's all stacked up and lined up. They're even gone beyond kind of just design stage. They're now into planning stage and stuff like that for building it. So when I hear that kind of thing, it makes me very positive, because my hands are itching then to kind of get our hands on one of those coaches to try and see how it stacks up on longer distance stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm not going to go into the heavy duty vehicle just this second, but there is 1,000 Hyundai, just to name the brand. I'm not allowed normally, but it's just easier than trying to dance around it. Heavy duty trucks in Switzerland now. And there is quite a number of left-hand drive, but I know from one of the speakers that we had here at the Public Sector Conference last February, they're pretty rare in right-hand drive in the UK at the moment, but that is changing. So I think that they, becoming available, the buses seem to be first out for hydrogen, that's for sure. And that's going. And a great question in there from Micheál Lyons for you, Ray. When can we expect a number of these hydrogen buses in Cork City, up Cork?
That's again another good question. Again, from a planning point of view, we have we're working in conjunction with the NTA on how we actually roll out zero emissions, and it starts with that transition from, at the moment we're transitioning, saying Galway from diesel to hybrids. Okay, that's the first step, but there's an acceleration towards the zero emissions. So, we're already, the NTA have already accelerated their tender process for battery electric double-deck vehicles, for example. So, you'll see those starting to get rolled out. Hydrogen is still a little bit behind in terms of its progress, but it's accelerating as well, and you can see the development in that accelerating as well. So, I think what you'll see is certainly in the public transport industry, there's an acceptance that it's not down to battery electric or hydrogen. They're both complementary zero emissions technologies. At the end of the day, a fuel cell electric vehicle is an electric vehicle with a hydrogen range extender on it, if you want to say that. It's got less batteries on it because it doesn't need them, but it has a higher range and has a faster fueling time. So I'm not selling hydrogen, I'm not selling the concept of it, but we have to keep an open mind on it as maybe the only other alternative to battery electric vehicle, where battery electric vehicle doesn't lend itself as well.
Yeah, because I think that what a lot of people forget is your buses might be operating sort of 18 out of 24 hours, like they're going non-stop.
Yeah, but we've coaches going up and down to Donegal. You know, they could be doing that 4, 5, 6 times a day.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're putting up to maybe 200,000, 250,000 kilometers a year type of thing, you know. And then we have at the other end of the scale, we have city buses doing stop start, maybe 20 kilometers an hour max all day in city centres. You know,
yeah.
So,
and just a question in there from Art: how many kilometers can you get from a single fill? In that, what did you think you got
from a single fill? If you're filling, if you get your full 300 and if you get your full, say, 35 or 36 kilos into the tanks on that particular bus there, you'd probably be getting somewhere between 400 500 kilometers on a tank. Maybe even up to 600, depends on the
with a potentially a 9-minute fill time.
It's certainly more comparable to your kind of diesel range tanks. There, you know, if you don't have the proper the full scale fueling system in there, as we didn't have for the tri, you won't get that. You know, we were probably going to get 250, maybe 300 out of it. So.
Yeah, and Caleb's asked a question which is quite broad, so I'll make it the last one, Ray. But it's, you know, you had the Dublin Fire Brigade involved, and what Caleb is saying is, you know, hydrogen historically was deemed unsafe, which I think is kind of looking back at some of the more infamous incidents. But, you know, what safety consideration did you have? But I mean, you said you had a meeting of minds with the fire brigade. I mean, you know, was there any major considerations that you had to take on board over and above what you mentioned in the presentation?
No, most of the, like, at the end of the day, if you take the bus itself or the vehicle itself, it's just acting as a gas storage container, to put it mildly, a mobile one. Okay. So as I said to you, as long as you know, if a bus is sitting in our yard as a hydrogen bus, it's sitting there like a petrol or a diesel tank is sitting in a vehicle. So it's not any different in that regard. It's only when something happens. And as I said, there's so many different safety systems in place on the vehicle anyway to protect that, the same way as there would be for CNG, the same way as there would be in petrol and diesel vehicles. It's just there's a perception there, and you know, the very first, I think, time we spoke about, everybody talked about the Hindenburg. You know?
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention that name. Yeah, cool.
This is nothing to be afraid of with it. Like, I mean, the Hindenburg was the Hindenburg. There's no combustion in this. This is a chemical process in the fuel stack. So there's no actual combustion of hydrogen. Yeah. Even there's, you know, if you Google, we had somebody post on our own internal company media platform, you know, a driver, somebody kind of found this thing on the net, and you know, it was a big headline, and it said gas or hydrogen station in Norway explodes, you know. And you know, oh god, geez. So but if you actually took the second entry on the Google list just beyond that one, it was actually linked to Nell's investigation on what happened. There was no explosion. What it was when there was a leak in the hydrogen from when the station was commissioned. It was off some nut that wasn't torqued correctly at the commission stage. And what happened was that the hydrogen releases, but it actually releases and dissipates very quickly, but it does so with a pop, effectively. So there was no fire in this particular thing, and there was no explosion. What there was it was like a sound ripple effect that blew a few windows out.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah.
Nobody hurt, nobody injured, and like that. And as a result of Nell's approach to that particular incident, an initial reaction by the state in Norway at the time was to stop fueling in fuel stations. Once Nell completed that investigation fairly quickly and reported very publicly on it, it actually built up a lot more confidence in the safety of the fuel, and as a result, they ended up opening up more stations.
There you go. That's great to hear. Yeah, and certainly for any of you who are looking for, you know, YouTubes and you're bored on a Friday night, there's quite a lot of interesting videos posted by people around Norway and Sweden, particularly around all of these alternative fuels. So it's great to see. But Ray, listen, thank you very much indeed. You did a fantastic job there, and think in terms of giving everyone an overview of what's going on. I hope you've opened everyone's eyes to what's actually happening, as in hydrogen vehicles on the road in the Republic of Ireland, being driven by Irish drivers, you know, operated Irish suppliers, the works. So, you know, a very well done to you, and thank you very much indeed for taking the time. what we want to do now is just move on a pace, and we will pass all of the, with Ray's permission, we're going to pass around a PDF of the slides. So you'll get all of this together with the Slido reports. In terms of discussion, we've opened it up there to questions. So we said we'd say a few words just promoting the Alternative Fuels HGV grant, and then we'll move on to the sort of survey of all of you as members as to what you'd like to do next. We have our own ideas, and we're happy to hear from all of you. So that's what we'll be doing next. But yeah, just to bring you through there now. This grant scheme was announced on the Monday the 15th, so basically Monday of last week. Obviously a bit of a holiday week. Well, not that any of us are getting any holidays. So it's just worth promoting to everyone. And it's effective the 15th of March. And the Department of Transport is providing the funding to TII, who in turn have contracted eMovis to be the scheme operator. And it's to assist in transition to lower emission alternatives. And the key point there is heavy duty. Okay, so let's just talk quickly about this. There's different levels of grant, by the way, for the different size of the undertaking. So it is for commercial vehicles, just to be clear. So, you know, for those of you in public sector where it is wholly state funded, won't qualify. It's only where the vehicle is actually doing some kind of reward of some description. You can be funded by the state, but there must be some reward involved in the vehicle, and that's to comply with state aid rules. And so depending on the size of your organization, you can see the level of grant you're going to get for the differential. So that's the difference between the diesel equivalent and the alternative fuel. So if it's hydrogen, you heard Ray saying there earlier, you know, potentially an extra €200,000 for the hydrogen fueled vehicle. In my opinion, this is a very generous grant in terms of that price difference. It's quite significant indeed. So you should be you know, paying attention to this, if I can put it that way. Now, we're only going to go through this in a whistle-stop tour, folks. So if you want to put this back on the agenda, we'll get someone to come along and explain us all the detail to us at the next meeting. So the kind of vehicles that qualify there, it's van, truck, bus, or coach. It is compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, fuel cell electric, which is hydrogen that Ray has just been talking about, battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, and, you know, there may be an onboard engine and generator. So it pretty much covers the whole range. The range extender type idea that Ray talked about, but everything has to be above 3.5 tons. Okay, that's a really key point. In terms of the process, there's an application on the TII website. When you get the PDF, you'll be able to click on this link. It will take you straight there. Any correspondence, is a website there. It's first come or first received basis. The grant letter will be issued 21 days to accept the grant letter. And then you have a 9-month cycle to get the vehicle, because obviously these vehicles are specialist, let's be honest. So but you would be thinking about what you have, and I believe a couple of heavy duty vehicle suppliers are now prepared to take orders for alternative fuel vehicles in most of the categories. Ray gave us a good update on what's going on there. You're looking at a total of €500,000, maximum of 20 vehicles. The company or organisation must be established in Ireland, and the vehicle should not have received any other subsidy or grant under any other scheme. And the application must take place before the purchase of the vehicle. So that sequencing is really important. So that was a quick plug there for the Alternative Fuels HGV scheme. I think you've seen there from Ray that there are real vehicles on the road. The NTA has got 3 vehicles now here, and Ray has given us a great illustration and detail on the operation of those vehicles. And what I'd like to do now is just ask you to look at a survey. So there's a couple of questions here. Those of you who are really quick off the mark can race ahead, but I just want to give Ray some feedback and just, how your view has changed in terms of interest in hydrogen as a result of that. And if you'd like to see more on hydrogen in future events, because we can line up a few other speakers. As Ray mentioned, he's part of Hydrogen Mobility Ireland. So there's quite a group of companies very active in this area. And just a quick reminder, this is Slido. So it's on your phones, slido.com, 9705 is the code. And just give us some feedback there. Excellent. First vote in there, Ray. It's coming in. And let's see, can we get a few more of you in? So the numbers have actually gone up. We're over 55 participants here. So thank you all very much indeed for your support today. And we managed to get, I think, nearly all the questions covered by hook or by crook. So thanks again to Ray on that score. And as I say, every single event that we've done to date, and this is the 4th one, all of the topics have been effectively driven by your requirements. So the more feedback you give us, the more you put into the survey, the easier it is for us to arrange the next event. So, please do get in there as much as you can. And sorry for the typos, folks. A little bit of a rush this morning putting this together. And if anyone's having any challenges with Slido, please do let us know. It has worked well to date, but that isn't to say that it works for everybody all the time. And there is a couple of questions coming up, folks. So if those of you who've raced ahead, you're free to do so to enter the events. And I'm just leaving that up there to just let that build up to a little bit of a quorum, as I said, about 20. And great. And okay, so I'm just going to move it on a pace. It'll stay open. Yeah, so I think, Ray, you've had a very positive impact there on people's perception of hydrogen. I think you can see there, they want to see more hydrogen and, more interested in the whole topic as a result. So I think that's a very positive outcome for you. And thank you very much indeed. And
ahead of us, yeah.
There you go. That's it indeed. And then with regard to the alternative fuel HGV grant, what are your next steps? And as you can see, some of you have already jumped ahead and filled in the polls. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you. And those of you are a little bit behind, don't worry, it'll stay open for a little while yet. That's interesting. Yeah, good group of applications there. Not applicable. Yeah, that's interesting now with the commercial. For those of you who feel you have a need for it, but it's not applicable, if you could let us know, maybe via reply to the email that myself and Mary will send out later today. The department is interested in your feedback, and when it comes to the next poll, and this next question in the poll is very much what you'd like on the next event, we'd be interested in hearing about that. Okay, so that's great. And then yeah, so there's lots of you putting in things here. So case study, tech vehicle availability horizon, so kind of a roadmap. Yeah, we had a speaker on right-hand drive vehicles in February. We're going to try and get them back for the 3rd of June. Installation of charging infrastructure. So I'm going to push you back to the videos that we published on the previous event. And if there's more you'd like on that, let us know. Maybe give us something a little bit more specific to work. More on hydrogen. Excellent. Contribution of indigenous anaerobic digestion and biofuels. Okay, that's very interesting. I actually have a speaker at another event tomorrow morning who is talking about that. And let's see, GNI, CNA, GM structure, contribution of indigenous managed charging network. Okay, great stuff, folks. EV rollout, emergency vehicles. Yeah, great stuff. So, what we might do is, the Freight Transport Association of Ireland have an event on tomorrow morning, which is specifically talking about anaerobic digestion to biofuels. In that case, it's going to gas to power trucks. And GNI will give a 2-minute update on where they're at with the infrastructure at that event, FTA in the morning. So for those of you who are asking about this, and recording of the event will be available, John. Yes, it will, and all the slides will be made available. But yeah, so the FTA in the morning, like 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, the FTA of an event. If you key into Google ftai.ie and alternative fuel working group, you'll see that pop up, and you can get into it. Now, if you're still looking for more public sector specific issues, no problem, we'll put that on the agenda for the next one. But it'll be sort of wrong of me not to let you know there is an event on about it tomorrow morning, actually addressing those specific issues. SEAI initiatives, the Clean Vehicle Directive, we can come back and revisit that. So those of you are putting in topics that we dealt with before in previous events, what I'd say to you is you could please look back at the working group, the transport community on EnergyLink, and maybe take a look at the videos, take a look at the links, and I think myself and Mary will do a quick check to make sure everything is up there for you. But look at what's been done before. If it hasn't been covered before, absolutely we will do more. And if you can pose a question that wasn't asked before, we'll be more than happy to put on an event and get you speakers to address it. I think all of our speakers to date, most especially Ray today, have proved that there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of things, a lot of really good work being done across the public sector transport environment. So thank you all very much indeed for that feedback. That gives us good ammo for the next one, and you will get a copy of this, folks. So if we forget something, you can come back and remind us. So just at this point, we normally kind of open it up to the floor if someone wants to ask a question, open mic, just to let you do that. We've answered, I think, all of the questions in the chat. So that's all the typed up stuff. The next event, we're thinking about hydrogen supply. It's sort of tentatively penciled in for the 21st of Feb. We'll look at what you've asked us for there, and we may tweak it a little bit in terms of speakers, just to meet your requirements. So I don't know if there's anyone wants to go open mic. You're all on mute, which is absolutely fine. Just go down through. Okay. So Ray, any final comments to add just before we finish up?
Well, I can find my unmute button, yeah.
The choice, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you think after 12 months of doing this?
Oh, nobody, it's our middle names, that's it.
Yeah, no, what it says in terms of vehicles, in terms of hydrogen vehicles, be confident that, you know, the technology is there, you know, there's no major issues. The transition from diesel to hydrogen vehicles, like, it should be a reasonably practical step. I think the problem in the state Inc. here at the moment is the actual build-up of the supply, the energy supply,
hydrogen supply,
and the fueling. And I think that's a bigger challenge for everybody. And really, it's kind of a chicken and egg, and has been for a while now. But I think people are kind of seeing the confidence that, yeah, vehicles will be available, and, you know, maybe not accessible to everybody initially, and that's partly why the bus industry here, or the bus, you know, the SEAI bus groups are seen as being a good kind of starting point for creating a level of demand that might allow the energy providers to produce at a reasonably competitive or you know, comparative cost, and then from there is to build it up. And I think that kind of goes back to the Hydrogen Mobility Ireland roadmap, if you look at that as well. You know, it's not something you create overnight. I liken it a little bit to the electrification of Ireland in the 50s and stuff like that. You know, this is an adoption of a brand new you know, power fuel system.
That's it indeed. And I think in transport, relatively few locations, it won't quite need to get to every village in Ireland, so it should be an awful lot quicker. Yeah. Okay, so Ray, thank you very much indeed. Hope you're happy with the feedback and the questions. Certainly you got lots of questions, which is great to see, shows great interest. To everyone else on the call, you can hold myself and Mary as kind of the facilitators accountable to make sure we come back to you with the right topics. So when you see the next invite going out, we're going to take into account what we've just seen and heard there. You might just let us know if there's anyone else you'd like to add. And for those of you who are interested in that particular AD topic, as I say, it's been dealt with in the morning at the FTA event at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if that's not suitable, that's it. Okay, can you give us a rough, so the final question in there, Ray, and I suspect it's one we'll need to take and come back to, but rerunning costs, can you give a rough diesel versus EV versus hydrogen cost? Not officially, I think, is the answer to that question. I don't know, Ray, do you want to venture on it, or is it just a bit too?
Yeah, look, what I can tell you at the moment is that you know, we actually went through this kind of thing with the supplier of the 3 buses that we're getting there, in terms of what induces the difference in costs and maintenance. And, you know, particularly when you're thinking about a diesel engine, it has a lot of moving parts and, you know, turbos and all sorts of things hanging out of it and all the rest of it. Whereas, you know, a battery electric or a hydrogen vehicle, it's, as I said, it's a chemical process. There's not a whole lot of moving parts, but there are things that need to be maintained. When it comes down to it, it's the fuel cell, predominantly in a hydrogen vehicle, where you have costs. And again, the perception is those maintenance costs on that fuel cell will come down over time as volume grows. In the same way with battery electric vehicles, it's the batteries that are the big cost hitter in terms of, you know, replacement costs and things like that. Whereas in a diesel vehicle, it's the diesel engine. So there's a little bit of comparative, because otherwise, other than that, around the vehicle, the components are pretty much very similar. So the maintenance on those are pretty much similar.
Yeah. So I think one of the things about heavy duty vehicles, in terms of answering that question, is almost every vehicle is designed to do a specific job. Therefore, it's very difficult to make comparisons. However, what we have done for the FTA working group, sorry to bring it up again, and if you go and Google it on their website, there is a fuel comparison chart in terms of costs. Now, it is a year out of date. The next version is just going through the suppliers, making sure all the figures are up to date. And that's probably the closest answer we could give you to that one, Kevin. But I will take on board what was said in the word cloud about having a roadmap, beginning to pull those things together. I think similar requests have come up regarding EVs, and I know the SEAI EV cost comparison calculator is being rebuilt at the moment. So I think, Kevin, if you can bear with us, we should be able to answer that question later on. And if you want to put it as a topic on the public sector conference, the placeholder for that just went up yesterday. It's the 3rd of June, and we can absolutely get a right-hand drive vehicle roadmap from speaker to come over from the UK, tell us what's becoming available over there to give you a heads up. And if fuel cost is something you'd like to hear about, just please do let us know, let the organisers know, because we're kind of looking at speakers now, and it's much better for us to address your needs than what we think you need, if I can put it that way. So please do shout. It's the only way we'll get you the right speakers. But on that note, we're just gone over 3 o'clock. I think pace to this afternoon was fairly relaxed. Ray, thank you very much indeed. You did a great job taking everyone through it and took all the questions. Well done. In regards to Louis' question there about the excuse me, I'll just bring it back up there. The total weight of the powertrain. If you get the chance, let us know. But I think that's one we'll probably send on in a following email and take it from there. But with that, folks, we'll bring matters to a close. Thank you all very much indeed. And just another new message coming in. That's great. Thanks, Caleb. So, folks, thank you all very much indeed. And if you can, I think you can use emojis to sort of clap your hands and things like that in Zoom. I lose track of what you can do on all these things. But thank you very much indeed again, Ray.